me get this sheet up so I can share it.
Hi, Beatrice.
Hello.
Okay, so we are now in Parshat Terumah, which is the beginning of the lengthy description across many weeks and many parshiot of the Mishkan.
Could you take it up a little bit? It's the Hebrew is a little smaller than the English.
Okay. Is that
Yeah.
better?
Yep.
Okay. So we're in the middle of the beginning of the lengthy description of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle. I'm sure that I will share this line many times in the coming weeks. As I mentioned, I can't remember, there's been a lot of Zooms already this week, but we just started a pretty significant renovation in the house. Our kitchen, our basement are all offline. So I can very much this year identify with the Mishkan and the need to be constantly on the move and packing up and moving things around. So it's, resonates a little bit more this year than perhaps in previous years. That being said, I wanted to focus today on the first of the kalim, of the vessels described in the Mishkan, which is the Aron, the Ark. And there's a curious detail that emerges with the Ark, and that's what we're going to focus on today. So let's look at the psukim. We're at the very beginning of the parsha after the introduction, which we spoke about a little bit last night in the memorial service for Karen, the Suli Mikdash. God gives the command to collect a donation, a contribution from every person whose heart so moves them to take the dedication. And the purpose of it is V'asuli Mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. They should make for me a mikdash, a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them. And then the first commandment that we're given is the Aron. Yasu Aron atzei shitim, amatayim v'chetzi arko, v'ama v'chetzi rochbo, v'ama v'chetzi komato. They should make an ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 cubits wide, and 1.5 cubits high. Tzipito to zahav tahor mibayit michutz titzapenu. V'asita alav zer zahav saviv. You should cover it in the inside and the outside with gold. And you should, pure gold.
This is in because the rings don't have to be pure gold.
Okay. I was translating off the cuff, but yes, you're correct. And you should also make for it a how does it translate it here? A zer zahav, a gold rim all around its top. You should also make rings on each of its corners and on its side, 2 on each side. And you should make poles out of acacia wood and cover those with gold. And you should put the poles into the rings on the sides of the ark in order to carry the ark with the poles. The poles should be in the rings of the ark. They may not be removed. And you shall place in the Aron the testimony, the tablets, which I am going to give to you. Okay, so we have this commandment to build an ark covered in gold with a beautiful gold rim on top. We know also that there's going to be the kruvim placed on top of that. And we have this detail that it has to have rings in which to place poles, and the poles cannot be removed. Okay, everyone with me so far?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Gemara tells us in source number 2. Amar Rebbe Eliezer, Ameziach Choshen Ma'al Ha'ifod, V'hamesir Badei Aron Loket. So anyone who removes the Choshen, the Kohen's breastplate, from the ephod, from the girdle that he wore underneath, or whoever removes the poles from the ark is loke, gets lashes. Shene'emar, lo yizach, lo yasuru. Says by the choshen, by the breastplate, lo yizach, it should not be moved, and it says by the poles, they should not be removed. Makif la Rav Achi bar Yaakov. Rav Acha bar Yaakov raises an objection. V'dioma ki ka'amar Rachmana chat kinhu v'avdinhu shapir kadesh lo yizach lo yasuru. Maybe it means when they're attached, they should be attached well so that they won't move. But not that there's a prohibition against ever removing them. Mikativ shelo yizach v'shelo yasuru. Does it say that they cannot be removed? Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Chanina Rami, Ketiv b'tabot aron yu habadim lo yasu mimenu, uchtiv uva et badav b'tabaot. Right, and then Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Chanina brings a second contradiction. It says that the pole should be in the rings, and they shall not be removed from it. And it also says, Ruva et badav b'tabaot, that the poles should be brought and put into the rings, meaning that they are not, seemingly they're not permanently there, but they're taken off and put back in. HaKetzad mitparkin ve'ein nishmati. So how do we resolve these seemingly contradictory verses? It means that they can be removed, but not easily moved, that they're secure, snugly fit in. Tanya Rami Hachi, a similar braita, b'tavot aron yu abadim, yachol lo yuzazin mimkoman, tamulo mar behuva et badav b'tavaot, ihu behuva badav yachol yu nichnasin v'yotzin, tamulo mar b'tavot aron yu abadim, haketzad mitarkin ve'ein nishmatin. So a similar logic came in which the conclusion is that they can be, I guess, forcibly removed and reinserted, but that they have to be a snug, secure fit whenever they are in there. So we have the rabbis in the Talmud trying to make sense of this, what seems to be a pretty straightforward description in the Torah that they should not be removed. Lo yasuru mimenu. But the Gemara says, well, maybe it's not so straightforward. And so much so that the Tosfot in source number 3, this is really just a bonus. You'll tell me when I need to scroll down in the English. But the Tosfot says, brings at least a hypothetical position. He's not so sure that he believed that he ultimately accepts it. Ilav demistafina mechavrai hava mina dechet tabaot hayu ba'aron. Right? If not for my friend's strong objections to my opinion, I would have thought that the ark had 8 rings in it. Not 4 as we had previously read or thought, but that there are 8. How so? V'chein mochiach hapasuk dichtiv yaktakta lo arba tavot zahav v'natzata arba pamotav hainu arba karnotav kidim mitarkiman. Right, so this makes sense. It says, scroll down. You shall craft for 4 golden rings, and it says later 2 rings on one side and 2 rings on the other side, which implies that there were 4 rings on its side in addition to the 4 on its corners. So some of the permanent poles, some of them were permanent poles, and 4 of them, which were above or below the permanent poles, were placed in the ark at the time of traveling in order to carry the ark. Okay, so the Tosfot takes it to the other extreme. He says, yes, maybe it makes sense that there were some removable or detachable poles, but that this imperative lo yasu mimenu, they cannot be removed, means that there was at least one set of poles that was permanently attached. Okay, and this gets codified by Maimonides. I brought for you in the Sefer Mitzvah. He also talks about it in the Mishnah Torah. Mitzvah ha-pei vav, I'm in source number 4, the 86th mitzvah in his count of the 613. He's hirhanu mehotzi badei ha'aron mitoch hatabaot. We're warned against removing the poles of the ark from the rings. Tuhu amro yitaleh, v'tabot ha'aron yu habadim lo yasu mimenu. This is the pasuk that we already saw, that the pole should be in the ring of the ark. They may not be removed from it. Whoever transgresses this negative prohibition receives lashes. Okay, so we have this mitzvah. In addition to the mitzvah to build an aron, which is part of the mitzvah to build the Mishkan, we have a separate mitzvah that we are not allowed to remove the poles from the ark. And I want to tonight explore why that might be. Are there any initial thoughts about this? Why must the poles be constantly attached from the ark to the ark?
What is the purpose of the poles?
Well, that might give us an answer. What's the purpose of the poles? What do you think the purpose
I
is?
assumed it was to carry the ark.
That's what I assumed also.
And
Yeah,
therefore,
I think
it might be that it's so if you have to leave in a hurry, you don't have to go looking for the poles.
Okay, so we're going to see that some people agree with you exactly, Judy, or maybe you thought you agree with them, but there are definitely those who say it's in order, right? You know, if we read the description of the travels in the desert, it doesn't seem that they were ever sprinting anywhere, right? It doesn't seem like this. You know, this was a ship that takes a long time to turn. But I guess, you know, in the case of an attack, in the case of an emergency, that it should be ready, right? You know, we always hear about what do you do if you're in a shul, in a school that has Sifrei Torah and there's a fire drill, fire alarm, right? So there's always going to be someone, wrongly, I should add, but there will always be someone who goes and grabs the Sifrei Torah before exiting the building. So that's kind of like what you're saying, in case there's ever a need for a quick movement, that it'll be ready to on the go.
Well, the poles are the connection between the handiwork of God and the actual hands of the Jews, and they should never be severed.
Oh, beautiful. So I think we're gonna get to someone who shares that thought as well, but that it's more of a symbolic meaning, right? Not necessarily the practical of let's be, you know, we have to always be ready to flee, but symbolically that there might be something about, right, what these poles are meant to carry or what they're connected to that has a very deep symbolic message. And so Gary suggests that symbolism might be that the poles are the handiwork of man, and the ark contains in it the luchot, which is the handiwork of God. And so it's a way of bridging the gap, perhaps, between the two.
More so, the poles are actually in the hands of the Levites.
Right. So someone else was speaking?
Instead of rings and poles, it could have said handles.
Right. It could have said why specifically poles?
Right. So bring those questions.
Yeah. That's a good question. Also, why specifically the poles as the means of being attached or of transporting? You know, that could be just a convenience factor, but there, you know, I never thought about why not some other way of carrying it. I mean, we do have this very famous story with David HaMelech, where he places the Aron on a wagon, right, and it stumbles, and then Uzzah tries to right it, and Uzzah dies as a result. So many explain, you know, it's a very complicated, difficult story to make any sense of. But one common explanation is that it was kind of a punishment for having placed it on a wagon instead of carrying it by hand. But why Uzzah should be the one to be punished for that, you know, doesn't quite answer that piece of it. But there's definitely a, you know, very prevalent idea that the Aron has to be moved and handled by hand, not anything else. But why specifically poles? I haven't thought about, you know, about that piece of it. Yes, Anne.
And just a quick one to lighten the theme a bit. You're moving things around a lot right now. And thank God, I guess most of us by this time have been through so many moves. One thing that happens in moves is that things get lost, okay, altogether. They just seem to disappear. And, but this idea applies, I think, all right at the beginning when they're going out into the midbar. I mean, who's going to come up with acacia wood that they're going to be able to make a pole with somewhere? You know, they gotta hold on to these because.
So I know we gave a shear. Okay, right. So you're saying now, right? So we've given I think we gave a shear last year on the acacia wood and how they even came by acacia wood in the first place, which was Yaakov planted it on his way down to Egypt. It might not have been in this parsha. I've definitely shared that midrashic tradition before. But you're saying even with the acacia wood that Yaakov gave them, if they don't leave it where it belongs, it might get lost.
It might get lost
in the chaos of life, not in the chaos of moving, but in the chaos of life, I guess.
Well, also in the book of Judges, the Philistines were trying to get a hold of it, and it wasn't until David and Shlomo really that things settled down a little bit. I mean, they never knew what of the Canaanite nations were going to come against them through a long period of time. It isn't as if having a Mishkan in one place, thank God, for a while was going to be it solved all the problems, because then along came the Philistines, and then they had more problems. So it's because, of course, there is acacia wood in Haaretz, and they would have been able to replace them. So it doesn't apply so well there. But anyway, I just couldn't help throwing in that idea.
Right. So just more to Judy's point than to Gary's. The other vessels also were transported by poles. So as we'll see as we move through the sources, some people ask, well, why, if it really is about this functional reason, why is it that only the Aron has the prohibition against removing the poles, right? So you might say, well, because the Aron is the most important, right? There's many sources that say the Aron is the centerpiece of the Mishkan, holding the Luchot Abrit. It's the most important of all the Kalim. So if you are in a bind and you can only grab one thing, it would be the Aron that you would grab. But it does raise the question. Maybe if it really is only about functionality, maybe there should be a permanent attachment of poles to the other vessels as well. So that's just something to think of as we move through these sources. Okay, so next is source number 5, which is the continuation of this week's Haftorah, which is the Shlomo's dedication of the Beit HaMikdash in Yerushalayim, right? Or it might be the culmination of the mitzvah of the Mishkan, right? The Mishkan was the temporary, and the Beit HaMikdash is the permanent. So when Shlomo dedicates the Beit HaMikdash, we see a really interesting thing connected to our poles. Az yakel Shlomo et ziknei Yisrael et kol roshei hamatzot nesiei havot ivnei Yisrael el hamelech Shlomo Yerushalayim lahalot et Aron Brit Hashem me'ir David Yitzion. So Shlomo gathers all the heads of the nation, all the tribal chiefs and the presidents or the leaders, however we translate it, to Jerusalem to bring the Aron from Ir David, which is Zion, to the Beit HaMikdash. Vayikalu el hamelech Shlomo kol ish Yisrael b'yerech ha'itanim b'chag hu ha'chodesh hashvi'i. So the entire nation gathers with Shlomo in, it's interesting, the month of Tishrei. This is where we get the idea. It's called Yerech ha'itanim, the month of the strong ones, the month with all the holidays in it, on Sukkot. Vayavo kol ziknei Yisrael vayisu ha'kohanim et Aron. The entire nation comes, and the Kohanim lifted up the Aron. Vayalu et Aron Hashem ve'et Ohel Moed ve'kol klei hakodesh asher ba'ohel vayilu otam hakohanim va'leviim. And they lifted up the Aron and the entire tent of meeting, the entire Mishkan, and all of the holy vessels which were in it, and they took, and the Kohanim and the Leviim took it. V'melech Shlomo v'chol dat Yisrael hanoadim alav yitol lifnei Aron mizabchim tzon uvakar asher lo yisapru lo yimanu me'rov. They offered an abundance of sacrifices. Vayavo hakohanim el Aron brit Hashem el mekomo el devir habayit el kodesh hakodashim el tachat kanfei hakruvim. They bring the Aron to its place in the temple under the kruvim. Ki hakruvim porsei knafayim al makom Aron. Right, the kruvim had their wings spread out over the place where the Aron was to sit. Vayasoku hakruvim al Aron va'avadav milmala, and the kruvim covered the Aron and its poles from above. Vayarichu habadim vayira'u rashei habadim min hakodesh al pnei hadevir lo yira'u hachutza vayusham ad hayom hazeh. And the staves, the poles, were so long that the ends were seen from the holy place. even from the sanctuary. But they could not be seen without, right? And they were there until this day. Meaning, when they placed it down, it was such a way that the poles were protruding out. The Kodesh HaKodeshim was separated by some sort of dividing curtain, and the poles were protruding into the curtain, out into the other sections of the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, so again, what's going on with the poles? And it seems that this is very intentional, that the poles should be a prominent feature that is seen as the Aron takes its permanent home. The Radak offers an explanation for this. Herichotam lechutz, they extended the poles outward. Klomar shemashchu otam kalpei chutz, lefi shelo hayat tzarich od latzeit bakateif, umitchila hayu havadim nitunim ba'aron b'shaveh, shayu odfim achorei Aron, kmo lifnei Aron. So he says, when they were in the desert, and up until this point, when they had to carry the Aron from place to place, the poles were evenly distributed on either end of the Aron. But now that it's found its permanent place, there's no need to further carry it. And so therefore, it was, they pushed it through, so it was only protruding out on one side and not the other. Sharei arba anashim hayu nosim oto lechol bad, shnei anashim echad lefanav ve'echad lefarav. V'kevan she'viu Aron ledvir kmo shehaya im badav. Okay, so now that there's no longer a need to carry the Aron, they made the poles extend, they pushed the poles forward, so they were only extending outward in one direction. And they were there until this very day. This is the author of Melachim speaking. He never removed them from the ark. Moshe Katuv lo yasu mimenu. As it says in our pasuk in Parshat Terumah, they may not be removed from the Aron. V'gam lo hechziru otam la'achoreihem, ela hayu moshlim lifnei hadivir le'olam. Zehu ad hayom hazeh. Right, and they also but they left it in this position forever. They couldn't remove the poles entirely. They left them protruding out so that the poles were seen from inside the Beis HaMikdash for everyone who was there. Okay, so that begins to give us a little bit of clarification, and maybe debunks a little bit of Judy's theory, because if he's saying right now that it's found its permanent home, they're never going to move it again. So right, we know it's possible that they never imagined the Beit HaMikdash would come under attack. It's actually likely that they never imagined it when they were dedicating it, but we know unfortunately that it was attacked, and that there might have been a need in history to grab the Aron and run, and the way that it was set up precluded them from doing so, if that's the reason, as Judy had suggested. Everyone's been very quiet. Are there any questions or comments?
I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
Again, it's kind of a more practical, mundane kind of suggestion, but I would think that with all of the other items, like the menorah and the table and so on, the inner altar, it was possible for a whole group of people kind of in and out of that place, and they would see them and they know where they were there and that they hadn't been stolen. But who goes tromping into the Holy of Holies? You just don't do that.
Right.
So if you wanted to be reassured that the Torah was always there, if you saw the poles, you knew that the Torah was there.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. So since only the Kohen Gadol could go into the Holy of Holies, and according to many, if not most, only on Yom Kippur, a big debate whether he was able to go at other times during the year. There's no way of knowing that it's actually there. So that's a beautiful suggestion, that maybe this is kind of an insurance to the entire people that everything is as it's supposed to be.
Explains the uniqueness of the mitzvah a little bit.
Yeah, very nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so back to the Parshanim on our Parsha, back to the commentators. We'll start with the Chizkuni, who I think, if I'm remembering, is very much in line with Judy, or Judy's very much in line with the Chizkuni. So he says as follows: Lo yasuru mimenu, they may not be removed, they may not be moved from the Aron. L'fi hapshat, ein sarach lebadim ela lahasiram, ki ein bahem shum tirud v'dochak bahem, l'fi shehem b'kodesh hakodashim, she'ein yotzei v'nichnas bo, rak kohen gadol, daled pamim b'yom echad v'shana. So he says, sorry, this is not exactly what Judy said. He said that the reason why the poles remain permanently attached to the Aron and not to any of the other vessels is because of what Anne just said. Because where the Aron was housed in the Kodesh Kodashim, in the Holy of Holies, there was no foot traffic there, right? These poles would not get in the way, as opposed to the menorah, to the shulchan, to the mizbeach, where people were there. That's where the action was happening in the Mishkan on a daily basis. If there's poles sticking out, that's a tripping hazard that would get in everyone's way, and so therefore it was just sort of a practical concern that since there's no reason to move them, then we're not going to move them. But for the other vessels, which were in heavily trafficked areas, there was a practical need to move them and clear the space. That's what the Chizkuni says. The Sefer HaChinuch, I'm very hopeful that one Shabbos soon we'll be able to resume our normal Shabbos afternoon schedule and continue our study of the Sefer HaChinuch. But if you recall, before Omicron put us on a bit of hiatus with our Sefer HaChinuch study, we were up to the third or the fourth mitzvah in Parshat Bo. I think we were discussing mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh when we took a pause. So that was the third mitzvah, or the fourth mitzvah. And here, halfway through Sefer Shemot, we're up to mitzvah number 96. We have the 10 Commandments and then all of Parshat Mishpatim to thank for that huge increase. So mitzvah number 96. Nishar Sheh HaMitzvah, the roots of the mitzvah. The Sefer HaChinuch always gives us an explanation and rationale for each mitzvah. L'fi she'aron mishkan haTorah, v'hu kol ikarenu u'chodenu. Since the Aron is the residence, the home, the protective place of the Torah, and the Torah is our very essence and our very glory, nitchayvu lenhog bo kol kavod v'kol hadar v'kol yichotim. So we have to treat the Torah with the utmost respect in any way that we can. Al kenitz tavinu levar nasir badei Aron limenu, penia tzrichim latzeit im Aron l'shum makom bimhirut, v'lai mitochat tirda v'achipazon lo yidbach yafeh liot badav chazakim kol hatzorech. Judy, he's saying exactly your idea. And if there's ever a situation where we have to move quickly, they may not put the poles in properly, and that might cause the Aron to fall, God forbid. That would certainly not be respectful to or dignified for the Torah. But now there's a prohibition against removing the poles. We have an assurance that they are properly attached and they're there nice and strong, and nothing bad will happen to the Aron. Otam acher. And another reason, Shekochle Hamikdash Tzoratan Mechayevet Leramez Inyanim Dolim Al Yonim, Kadesh Yadam Nifal L'Tova Mitoch Machshavato Bahen. Says each one of the vessels of the Beis Hamikdash has some very lofty, elevated spiritual symbolism. Ratzah Kel L'Tovatenu Shalot Tifseid Otah Tzura Afilu Lefi Sha'ah, and God didn't want this to ever to ever depart our mind, even for a moment. Whatever the symbolism is, doesn't get into what the symbolism of the Aron is, but he says, rest assured, there is some great symbolism of the Aron. We want to be sure that the image is properly entrenched in our mind, so therefore we're never going to mess with how it's supposed to look. Okay, so these two definitely fall down on what we'll call the functional explanation for why the need for the poles.
Well, it's the functional explanation that, if we have to move quickly, we can do it, with poles. But maybe it's a little bit of a, I don't know if prophecy is the right word, but prophecy of Jewish history that was going to unfold, that we will always be moving quickly, and we're going to be in diasporas, et cetera. And this is sort of laying the groundwork.
Okay, so let's skip ahead. That everyone is doing a beautiful job of anticipating, and right, we say in Hebrew Baruch Shekivanti when we intuit something that someone previously has said. So let's skip to number 11 and see what Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch says, because I think Dad, you can probably say Baruch Shekivanti to Rabbi Hirsch, and let's read that. So he says, the badim, the poles, the mean of carrying the ark, symbolically represent the command and the mission to carry the ark and its contents, if it becomes necessary, away from the precincts of its present position. The command that these means of transport may never be lacking is to emphasize in our minds the fact that from the very beginning, it must be made clear that this Torah and its mission is in no way bound or confined to the place or existence at any time of the temple and sanctuary. This meaning of the constant presence of the badim, of the poles, as proof of the independence of Torah of any place, receives further emphasis when it is contrasted to the other appurtenances of the sanctuary. I didn't pronounce that right. The sanctuary, especially to the table, to the shulchan and the menorah, both of which had to be supplied with the badim. The poles did not have to be permanently in place, but only inserted when actually to be used. The thought immediately jumps in mind to Israel's table and Israel's menorah. Its material life is in its full completeness, and its spiritual and intellectual life in complete clarity and brightness are bound to the soil of the Holy Land. Israel's Torah is not. Okay, so the shulchan, right? The shulchan represents with the showbread, with the loaves that were constantly there, right? So very interesting, right? What does this insight of Rav Hirsch, first of all, Dad, so I think you're absolutely correct that, or he would, you're absolutely saying what he says about, right, Torah will continue to exist beyond the Beis HaMikdash, and if God forbid, or as we know in hindsight, that very much is the case, that there will be an exile and a diaspora, that Torah will continue to flourish and to be relevant in our lives. And that's part of the symbolism, not just to protect the physical ark, but the idea and the content of what's in the ark, right? But also, what does this mean for the Zionist vision, right? That Torah, he says, is completely independent of any physical location. We very much have the idea of Ein Torah K'Torah Eretz Yisrael, that there is no Torah like the Torah of Israel. So Rav Hirsch seems to maybe not be saying that so much.
It
So
can
it's,
also be challenged on the basis of the menorah.
yeah. So again, we could spend a whole shiur getting into the symbolism of the menorah. I don't remember what he says about the menorah, but yeah, why that he sees that as physical and not spiritual. I generally would think of the menorah as being more of a spiritual symbol. So we'll have to look up. Our homework is to look up what Rav Hirsch says about the menorah, and see how that ties in with everything. Okay.
Good idea anyway, yeah.
Yeah, it's always a good idea to look at Rav Hirsch. He has some beautiful insights. Okay, so let's go back to number 10, the Meshech Chochmah of Meir Simcha of Devinsk. He quotes our pasuk, he quotes the Gemara that we saw, that anyone who removes the poles gets lashes. He raises the same contradiction that we see, that for other kalim there is no prohibition against removing the poles. Right, but the poles are always attached, firmly attached to the aron. What's going on here? Yireh al pi midrash, Sharon romez leketer Torah. Shehu munach lekol harotze likach. So he says, based on the midrash, the Aron represents the Keter Torah, the crown of Torah. Right, we have in Pirkei Avot the description of 3 crowns, or really 4 crowns. We're told that there's 3 crowns. What are the 3 crowns?
The crown
Keter.
around the table.
Well, there's
Sure.
Keter Kahuna, the crown of priesthood, Keter Malchut, the crown of kingship, Keter Torah. And in Pirkei Avot it says the Keter Shem Tov Ole Al Kulan. The
Yep.
crown of a good name is referred to all of those. But so we have 3 crowns. We have the crown of Torah, the crown of Melucha, and the crown of Kahuna. And the crown of Torah is the best, right?
Right.
So and that's alluded to in the Aron. And it's there for anyone who wants to take it. So he says a Talmid Chacham needs the support of others. A Torah scholar needs others to provide his physical, his financial well-being. Right, so the Meshech Chachma seems to be very much an advocate of the Kolel lifestyle, and that's how Torah endures. V'chein muzal gam al ha'aron b'yoma k'tiv asita lecha aron eitz v'katuv asu aron atzei shitim mikan l'tamid chacham shebnei Yisrael mitzuvin lasot lo milachto. Right, so the Torah in one place says asita lo lecha aron eitz, should make for you in the singular an ark out of wood. And it also says in our parsha, ve'asu aron atzei shitim, they will make in the plural an ark. So the Gemara derives as proof that the residents of a city should support the Torah scholars of that city. So that's the meaning of the badim. That the badim, the poles, symbolize those who support Torah. Also those who support the Torah sages. Talmid Chacham is a walking ark of the walking embodiment of the ark of the testimony of God and the Torah. So right, so the supporters should always have a connection to the Torah.
How does a Talmid Chacham and a Torah sage become the same thing? So sage to me is a much stronger designation than a Talmid Chacham.
I mean, so technically a Talmid Chacham means a student of a wise one. But a Talmid Chacham colloquially means a sage. That's what we mean by sage. We say the biggest praise you could give someone is someone in the yeshiva is that he's a Talmid Chacham. It means well versed and knowledgeable. We have other descriptions of those who are versed in Torah, Zakanim, an elder, tzaddik, but Talmid Chacham I think is a normative way of describing someone who's well educated and well versed in Torah. Okay, so he sees the poles as, I guess, both a reminder of the need to support Torah for everyone, right? Recognizing that not everyone is going to be a Torah sage, but everyone can certainly help in the development and sustainment of Torah sages, but also perhaps as a tribute to all those supporters who enable Torah to flourish, that there's a constant recognition of their contributions as well. Okay. Finally, two more ideas. So I saw a beautiful Var Torah, which connects the idea of the poles to the pasuk that's familiar to all of us from our Shabbos davening, which is Eitz Chaim Hi Lamacha Zikim Ba V'Tomcheha Me'ushar. The Torah is described as an Eitz Chaim, a tree of life, Lamacha Zikim Ba, to those who hold on to it. So the idea is that the poles are that which enable us to grab onto the Torah. Gary, I think this goes back to what you had said at the beginning of this year, that if the Aron is houses God's handiwork in the form of Torah and the Aseret HaDibrot, so the poles are what allows us to take hold and forge a connection and relationship with God's handiwork. And so we need the poles, we need that kind of bridge in order to be able to grab onto and establish our own personal connection and relationship with Torah, right? And again, the symbolism that it's there, right? Anyone who wants to can grab onto it, right? You don't, perhaps opposite of the Meshech Chochmah, but that anyone is able to take hold and begin a journey of Torah study and to learn and become connected to Torah. That's what the poles are, right? To be able to grab onto it. And finally, I want to end with the Midrash Rabbah. Oh, sorry, I didn't give you that verse on the source sheet. I'm sorry. But finally, the Midrash Rabbah, which I think is just beautiful, and I think ties into much of what we've been saying. So it's focusing not so much. Well, part of it focuses on the poles, but it begins by focusing on the Aron itself. And this was noted already by the Meshech Chochmah. Vasu Aron Atzei Shitim. They should make an ark out of acacia wood. Makativ lemala ve'kuli truma. Miyad ve'asu Aron Atzei Shitim. Mahatorah kadma lapol kach b'masa mishkan hikim et ha'aron l'chol hakelim. Right. So notes that the first piece of the Mishkan, the first detail that we're given, is to construct the Aron. It says, the Medrash says, just as Torah is first above all else, so to the Aron, which houses the Torah, is first of all the vessels of the Mishkan. Ma ha'or kodem l'chol ma'aseh Bereshit, af ha'b'mishkan ha'torah shnikret or, just like light was the first thing in creation, Torah, which is called or, is also the first thing in the Mishkan. So everything connected with Torah comes before all the other vessels. Davar acher. Yasu Aron, they should make an Aron. Mipnei ma b'chol hakelim ha'ela kativ ve'asita, u'Aron kativ ve'asu Aron. With all the different vessels, it says ve'asita, you should make. But with the Aron, it says ve'asu, they should make. Amar Rabbi Yehuda ben Rabbi Shalom. Amar lo Kadosh Baruch Hu. Yavo hakol v'asku b'Torah, kidei sheyizku kulam l'Torah. Right? So he says it's intentional that it's only the Aron, which is said in the plural. And the message being that God is saying everyone should come and toil themselves, occupy themselves with the Aron, in order that they'll all merit to have a stake in the Torah. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Yochai. Shloshak tarim him. Here's our three crowns: Keter Malchut, Keter Kahuna, Keter Torah. Keter Malchut zeh hashulchan. So he says each of the three crowns is represented by a different one of the vessels of the Mishkan. The crown of kingship is the shulchan, is the table. Keter Kahuna zeh mizbeach. The crown of priesthood is the altar. The Keter Torah zeh ha'aron, and the crown of Torah is the Aron. Lama nichtavim zer, zar, v'nikraim zer. So the crown, each one of these has a crown or some sort of, how's it translated here? A gold crown on top of it, or gold surrounding of it. But the word zer, which is used for crown, is the same spelling as the word zar, which means stranger. So why is that the same, right? The same spelling with different vocalization. Lomar lecha im adam zoche na'asim lo zer, v'im lav zar. To teach that if a person merits, then each of these crowns, the crown of Torah, the crown of kingship, the crown of priesthood, becomes for him a crown. But if not, if he doesn't merit to have a part in them, then they're strange to him. They're like a zar. Kulam kativ va'asita lo va'aron kativ va'asita alav. Lam chashet keter tola mu'ula yoter mikulan. Zachadam laTorah ki'ilu zaka lekulan. So another difference in the description. For all the other vessels, it says va'asita lo zer zahav. Make for it a crown, a crown on top. for the Aron, it says, Vasita alav, make on top of it. And this also comes to teach us that Torah is elevated and preferred over all the other ones. If a person merits to have a piece in Torah, to have a stake in Torah, and it's as if he's merited all of them. Okay, so back to our original question, why the prohibition against removing the poles? We've seen several different explanations, but I think it all kind of comes together in the fact that the Aron, which houses the Torah, houses the Ten Commandments, is the embodiment, the symbolism of Torah. And the idea being that these poles are supposed to drive home the point that Torah should be accessible and available to everybody who wants to come and take a piece of it and grab a hold of it, should be able to and eligible to. And that's my takeaway from the symbolism of the poles, right? We can throw in the idea of Torah, right? I think it's connected, but Torah not being bound by any geographical place. That wherever we are, we can always continue to learn, strive, and live a life of Torah, no matter the historical circumstances around us. Any final questions or thoughts on any of this?
Oh, very good thoughts.
All right. Well, if that's the case, then have a good night, everybody. Tomorrow night is our final Zoom event for the week. The Rosh Chodesh group is meeting at 8 o'clock. The link was in the announcements. Judy, I assume another email will be sent out with that link.
We're going to send another one out tomorrow. That's what Jen.
Okay. So everyone's encouraged to join that. Looking forward, please God, weather permitting, COVID permitting, to see everyone in shul on Shabbos. Bundle up, it's a little chilly, but the davening and the Torah's message will hopefully keep us warm.
Thank you, Rabbi, for
Thank you.
stimulating
Thank
Good
you.
luck finishing your job.
Oh, we're just getting started, but mazel tov to you, Martha and Jeff. We're very excited.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
mazel tov.
Laila tov.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.